and your container. I was in one of your festivals last year. It was fabulous. I'm really happy to be back. Thank you for having me. It's been beautiful coming into the last sort of bit of that last workshop and just getting a feel for where you guys are at and what the theme and the feeling and the energy that you guys have been percolating in. So I feel that firstly, it's a really deep honor to come in on the back of that, and at the end of your day, it's at the beginning of my day here in beautiful Byron Bay, northern New South Wales, Australia. So it's the end of your day over there. So you've had a big day of learning all sorts of fabulous things and getting some beautiful transmissions from all sorts of amazing beings that are doing great work in the world. So yeah, as Chelsea said, I am a relationships intimacy coach, psychotherapist, counselor, and author. I've focused my work on relationships and intimacy because, as I'm sure you all know, it is one of the areas of our life that we find most difficult. And it's also the area of our life that we want to excel in, we want to do well. And yet no one teaches us this. No one teaches us how to do relationships well. So where do we learn? Where do we get an idea of how to do relationship well? We pick it up from the people around us, the examples that we have, and often those examples haven't been great. And the thing is, and I think by the fact that we're all here today having this call and in this container, in this festival, there's a commonality that we all really want to be able to do relationship well. There's a consciousness that we want to be able to bring to the act, the experience of relationship, to because we know that there's a lot that we can get out of it. We're not just in it for what we can experience, for the pleasure, for the camaraderie. There's something more. There's something more that I think we can all feel and sense that is available to us if we do relationship really, really well. So how do we do it? How do we do relationship well? Well, I always like to say, of course, the title for this workshop is The Art of War. But I also believe that relationship itself is an art form. When you're an artist, whatever sort of artist you are, of course, there are certain skills and talents that come in useful. Yeah, if you want to paint a picture, it's great to be able to have some technical know-how of how to put paint to canvas and blend color and light and make a picture come to life on a canvas. But technical knowledge, technical know-how is not necessarily going to create great art. To create great art, the artist needs to be able to surrender to the art itself and allow the art to then emerge through them as the channel for the art. Whether I'm a sculptor or a painter or a singer or a musician, I'm sure you all have had this experience where art just comes forth through you rather than, okay, I'm just going to put paint on a painting or words on a paper, So of course the same thing goes for relationship. What is the art of relationship? I always say that art is a verb. It's not something we have, it's something we do. Yeah, it's something we have to be engaged in. We have to be actively engaged in our relationships as an art, as an expression of our soul.
That was awesome. That was awesome.
I'm just hearing some background noises. If we can mute ourselves, please. Thank you. So if we are engaged in our relationship from this place as the artist, as the art, Of course, there are some tools, there are some skills, there are some technical know-how which are going to suit us and serve us really, really well. And of course, one of those is, how do we deal with conflict? How do we deal with this thing that is inevitable in our life and, of course, in our relationships? I always say relationship is the greatest arena for personal growth. You know, if we're really wanting to dive into our own personal growth, then be in a relationship and notice what comes up for you in that relationship. When we're in an intimate relationship with somebody, whether that's for a day or a week or a year or a decade, we are faced with the perfect mirror who is going to show us all of our shit, all of the stuff that we want to hide, all of the stuff that we want to hide from ourselves, that we want to hide from the others, that we want to hide from the world. Our partner in our relationship is going to be the perfect mirror for that. And they're going to mirror that back to us very willfully and very effectively. And of course, this is where conflict arises. Yeah, when we're faced with this mirror who's showing us those bits of ourselves that we just don't want to hear, that we just don't want to face, that we just don't want anyone else to know about. So when that happens, of course, we react. We react to it. And often we get defensive, and we come into the relationship into a place of defense, and either that defense comes from a place of comes as an attack to shut that person down and stop them reflecting my own shit back to me, or it comes from a retreat where I go and withdraw into myself and into my cave and hide and pretend everything's going to be okay. Yeah. So there's a couple of ways in which we can deal with these situations. And often most of them aren't very healthy, aren't very helpful, and definitely don't resolve the problem, don't get us any closer to resolution and closeness. When we're in intimate relationship, well, let's just look at that for a second. Yeah. Intimacy is into me see. The very word intimacy is an invitation to allow somebody else to see into me. It's an invitation that I offer my partner to say, hey, here I am. Here's my heart. Here's all of my wounds. Here's all of my history. Here's all of my childhood dramas and pain and wounds that, of course, are going to come up in my relationship. Yeah. And I'm inviting you to see me, to see all of that, to hold it, knowing full well that you can toss my heart into the dirt. It's a, I hope I can swear on here because I like swearing. It adds emphasis. It's a fucking courageous thing to do. Yeah. That intimacy is one of the most courageous acts that we can ever engage in. Yeah. Good. Permission to swear. Thank you. Intimacy in its very nature is one of the most courageous things we can ever do in our life. So it's no wonder we're all scared. We're all shit scared of intimacy, of being in that experience where somebody can take our heart and throw it in the dirt. And yet we all want that. Yeah, we all want that. We all want to be seen for all of who we are. We all want somebody to really see us and experience the fullness of who we are. But it's scary as all hell. So it's no wonder we put up the walls. We create adaptations to hide ourselves and masks that we can project to the world to pretend we are a certain way. Yeah. But of course, all of those walls, all of those masks, all of those things, those protective mechanisms that we put between us and our prospective partners, they prevent intimacy. They shut down our ability to really experience what the true fullness of what intimacy can be. So we shoot ourselves in the foot constantly. we are taking ourselves and preventing other people from getting close to us, when all we really want is that connection, is that intimacy, that feeling that I am met and I meet you in our humanity. Who's feeling me? Yeah. Give me some comments, please. Interact with me. Show me your comments. Can you feel what I'm talking about? Who knows that fear, that terror of intimacy? Yes, thank you. It is terrifying. It is terrifying. Thank you. Lovely to know you're with me. So, and yeah, someone said vulnerability is scary. Absolutely, yeah. So this is what I'm talking about. Intimacy has no ability to happen without vulnerability. And, you know, it goes for us all, but I'm a man, and this vulnerability thing is something that I have been systematically taught not to go anywhere near. Yeah, and much of my working career as a psychotherapist has been with men in various different forms, and this is something that particularly that half of the population of humanity really struggle with. But let's face it, it is not a gendered experience. This is something that we all deal with. So how does this relate to conflict? How does this relate to the art of war? In every way. Conflict only arises when we feel scared. It only happens when we feel afraid. When we feel afraid of somebody getting close to that part of myself that feels broken, that feels tender, that feels ashamed. Yeah. So how do we be even in the possibility of potential conflict whilst keeping ourselves safe? Because ultimately that is our goal in life, our goal in relationship, and all of the ways in which these little parts of ourselves have created protection mechanisms to keep ourselves safe, to keep those little wounded parts of ourselves safe. Yeah. We've all experienced pain. We've all experienced abandonment of sorts. We've all experienced being ridiculed and shamed for who we are in some ways, I'm sure. And so we've all created various ways of protecting ourselves, what I call adaptive mechanisms to protect ourselves, to prevent, to put the wall up, to put the defense up, to say, no, you're not going to get close to me. No, you're not going to be able to do that the way that other person did in the past. I'm going to prevent myself from feeling the fear, the tenderness, the terror of abandonment, of ridicule, of shame. So we're going to do whatever we can to prevent that from happening. So part of being in relationship, whether that's in an intimate relationship with a committed partner, or whether that's any sort of relationship, let's face it, life is made of relationships. Everything you learn here is valuable in any relationship that you're going to engage in. This is not just about intimate relationships. But of course, intimate relationships is where we get closer and closer to our hearts being exposed. Yeah. Every relationship that we have has various degrees of intimacy. You can be in a relationship with the barista in your local cafe, where you go and buy your coffee every morning and they know you by name. There's a certain level of intimacy that you share in your experience of purchasing your latte. They know your order by by heart, and it's ready when you arrive, and it's great, and they call you by name. It's beautiful. We have an experience of being met in some way, but there's a level of safety in that relationship. We're not really being fully intimate, but there is still a level of intimacy. Of course, family members, people in your family of origin, your siblings, your parents, these are, of course, people that you have a level of intimacy with. And they know you and you know them. And there's, of course, a level of expectation of who you are or who you should be, and vice versa. Yeah. And of course, family of origin is a place where a lot of conflict can arise. And it's slightly different to the sort of conflict and the sort of relationship and the sort of intimacy that we have with an intimate partner who we're in a committed relationship with. But of course, the same rules apply, the same skill, the same art applies with all of those relationships that we can have. So when we're looking at what gets in the way of good conflict, what gets in the way of good conflict? Well, firstly, let's look at conflict. For conflict is inevitable. What is conflict? Conflict is about a mismatch of opinions and values and ideas. Yeah, it's a disagreement, and of course, I can have a view that is different to yours, but that doesn't necessarily mean it turns into a fight. We can have conflict, we can have disagreement, but what takes that disagreement into a fight, into a war? It's when we defend, when we feel attacked, and we need to defend, and we need to stamp down our rightness. We need to make sure that we're right and they're wrong. This is what causes the biggest amount of war in our relationships, whatever kind of relationships. So the first key to the art of war, to do relationship conflict well, is in surrendering our need to be right. Through conflict, we get to understand other perspectives. We get to understand where another person's at, where they're coming from, what their ideas are, how they see the world. What I think gets in the way in our relationship, what gets us away from connectedness and intimacy, is expecting another person to see things the same way I see things. But how can I expect another person to see through my eyes and my experience and my embodied experience of the world? I need to help them understand how things look through my eyes, through the lens in which I'm seeing the world. Every one of us is unique. We're all seeing the world and experiencing the world through a very unique lens. And this lens is made up from our beliefs, our values, our self-esteem, the experiences that we've had throughout our life, from childhood all the way through to today. Every experience that we've had, every way in which we've created a self-identity, goes towards creating that lens in which we're looking through the world, at the world, yeah, and experiencing life. And of course, we've all had a unique experience. So through conflict done well, we help each other understand where we're coming from. And of course, we get to understand where they're coming from, how they see the world, how our partner is observing me, how my partner is observing my actions or the world or whatever situation it is. Yeah. In a good relationship and a relationship done well, that really is necessary. We need to be able to understand each other. We want to be able to understand each other. If I really love my partner, I want to know how they're seeing the world. I want to understand them. I want to be able to spend a moment in their shoes to understand who they are and how things are for them in their experience as much as I can. This is about empathy. It's about connection. It's about compassion, which of course are really, really important things for a good working relationship. So conflict, of course, is useful, is really useful if we do it well. It's also a way in which we get to grow. We get to, because through this experience of understanding each other, understanding different points of view, understanding new perspectives, if we enter into that with a level of humility and willingness to hear and understand and feel, then I have the opportunity to reassess my own values, my own perspective, my own lens. I can shift and change my own lens. It's not set in stone. Yeah, it is constantly shifting and changing. So through the experience of hearing another and really getting to understand, wow, you know, this is how you see the world. This is what happens to you when I say this, or I act like this. Wow, this is interesting to me. But that takes a certain level of courage and humility and vulnerability to be able to say, okay, I hear you, I listen, I'm listening to you, and I want to understand. And firstly enough, I need to be able to again relinquish, surrender my need to be right. So there's a few ways in which we deal with conflict. And most of us have learnt through our experiences of life, through the ways in which we've seen examples of dealing with conflict in the past from our family of origin, ways in which conflict can happen and can work well. And of course, this also comes down to our belief in ourselves and our value in ourselves. In order to have conflict work well and to be able to stand in the fire of conflict, there's a certain level of value of self that I need to be able to have. But I'm just going to see if this whiteboard works. And I'm going to draw a little picture, so just bear with me for a second. Okay, beautiful. So I have a little whiteboard. So there's a few ways we can deal with conflict according to how much I value my own needs or the needs of others. This is pretty terrible. Bear with me. Okay, so if I value my own needs and the needs of others in a way which is not so much, then I'm going to avoid conflict. This is what I like to call the ostrich, the one that sticks the head in the sand, pretends everything's okay. Yeah, I don't want to deal with this. I'm not here. This blah, 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 blah. I can't hear conflict. I'm just going to stick my hand, pretend it's not existing, and hope that it goes away. If I feel that somebody else's values and needs are more important than my own, then I'm going to please. Yeah. So this is the people pleaser, or the teddy bear. Yeah. So the avoider is the ostrich. The pleaser is the teddy bear. So I'm going to just let you get your way. I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure you're okay. Your needs are served in spite of my own needs. And if my own needs are more important than yours, I'm going to be the competitor. And this is the shark. The shark wants to get his or her needs met no matter what. They are right, no matter what. They're going to make sure that you are you know that you're wrong and that I'm right, and I'm going to persuade you no matter what. So that's a competitor. In the middle, where it's like, okay, let's meet in the middle somewhere. This is the compromise. Yeah, this is the fox. The fox is smart and cunning and likes to meet where we can both get our needs met somewhat. Yeah, compromise is sometimes the best we can hope for, and is sometimes the right way to go. And sometimes with compromise, you know, let's say, for example, we have one orange. I want some orange and you want some orange. So let's cut it down the middle. I've got half an orange, you've got half an orange. Easy. We've both got half of what we wanted. We both actually wanted a whole orange, but we both got half of what we wanted. But so there's a compromise there. Yeah. So with compromise, it can work, it can be great, and we have to relinquish some of our needs. We have no choice but to relinquish some of our needs, and sometimes that's the right way to go. Sometimes it's a bit of a cop-out. Sometimes it's a little lazy. We can go one step more and get to the win-win. And this is the owl, the smart, the wise owl. So with the owl, we really want to get to a place where we both get in everything that we want in this situation. So if we look at the orange example I used before, if we spend a little more effort and we try to understand each other's perspective fully, what we can do is through that process of understanding, I may realize that actually what you want, you don't need the whole orange. You just need the peel, because you're making a cake. You're making a beautiful orange and poppy seed cake, and I actually just want the juice because I'm making an orange juice. So I didn't need the entire orange. I was just going to throw the peel away. But hey, you get the peel. And you didn't need the juice. I wanted the juice. So look, through that experience of course, diving deeply into a conversation, into an experience where we get to really understand each other's perspective and each other's needs fully, we've worked out a win-win solution. Yeah. So just to reiterate, so the avoider is the ostrich. They don't want to have a bar of this conflict. They are just not interested. They want to put their head in the sand, pretend it's not there. The pleaser just wants to relinquish their own needs, their own boundaries, their own desires, and make sure the other person gets what they need. The competitor is going to make sure they win no matter what, whether they're right or wrong. The compromiser is trying to meet in the middle, trying to come to a place of compromise where we both get our needs met somewhat. But the owl is really looking for that win-win solution. And that takes time, that takes effort. Guys, I'm just gonna, if you want to take a screenshot of that, go for it. I'll leave it there for a second if you want to take a screenshot, and then I will get rid of it in a second. So, of course, what do we need to do in order to get to that win-win solution? A, we need to be able to manage our emotions. B, we need to be able to be willing to relinquish our need to be right. And C, we need to be able to communicate. You know, communication is talked about all the time. And let me just come back to Zoom. Stop broadcast. Okay, I'm back. Communication is talked about all the time. Often I get clients come to me, couples come to me that tell me they're terrible at communication, that communication is such a big problem for them in their relationship. And they do a really, really good job of communicating to me how bad at communication they are. So it tells me straight away that communication isn't the problem. Emotions are the issue. Their emotional management or emotional mastery, what I like to call emotional mastery. Because it's emotions that get in the way of good communication. It's emotions that get in the way and cause conflict to be a place that is unpleasant and unhealthy and unhelpful. Of course, emotions are going to be there. They're going to arise. They're going to be a really big part of our conflict. They're going to be a big part of our relationship. They're a big part of our life and are really, really important. But what we want to be able to do is be the master of our emotions rather than the other way around. So our emotions get in the way of good communication. And when we're communicating from a highly emotional place, we're not very good at it. We say nasty things. We do nasty things. We say and do things that we later regret. So sometimes the best thing we can do if we're highly emotional is not communicate, is not be in the same room together. Sometimes we need to say, okay, time out. Let's pause this for a moment. Let's get out. Let's have a break. Let's go and do what we need to do to self-regulate and take ourselves out of our highly triggered state to a place where I can communicate with you in a way which is clear, mature, conscious, and is not coming from this need to be right, this collapsed place where I'm just in a trauma response, a freeze response. So how do we do that? Very, very clearly, like I just said, time out. Let's just call it. One of the main things we need to do in that situation is say, hey, look, I'm not dealing very well with this. At the moment, I need some space. It feels like you need some space. Let's go and have some time apart. Let's come back to this in an hour. It's really, that bit's really, really important. We make a commitment to come back to the communication in a prescribed time, and we follow through. If that time comes and we're not ready, we come back, we say, I need a little more time, and come back. One of the worst things that we can do, and that is going to create defensiveness, is walking away without making that commitment, without doing the time out, and not following through on a commitment to come back. That is what we call stonewalling. That is shutting down the communication. That is abandoning that other person who is possibly in a triggered state. They're in a triggered state because they're afraid. They're wanting to ensure their safety, in whatever means that they're doing. And by you walking out on them, by you abandoning them, that's going to reinforce that their trauma experience that they're trying to avoid, and they're going to either attack you more or just feel really, really shit. It's not a good place to be. And it's definitely a place that we can have some level of control and consciousness around. So calling a timeout, really, really important. What I think is important to recognize, and this again is really coming back to that emotional mastery piece. When we are triggered, when we're in a triggered state, for whatever reason, our emotional reaction is high, we're heated, and we're feeling the need to defend, we're feeling the need to protect ourselves somewhat, we're no longer an adult. It's very often the case, and probably always the case. In that situation, what has happened to us is that when we're triggered, it is an old trauma that is being triggered. Yeah, it's an old response that is being triggered. Whatever our experiences have been as in childhood, we've had experiences where we feel unsafe, and we've created ways in which we've had certain levels of trauma. Yeah. So what I like to differentiate is the wounded child and the adaptive child. The wounded child is the one that received the original wound. Yeah. So that, let's say we had an angry, volatile mother. So we knew there were certain behaviors that were going to trigger that. Yes. So that wounded child has had that experience maybe at a very, very young age, and realized that shit, the world is unsafe, that woman is unsafe, and then the adaptive child comes in and said, okay, we're going to avoid having that angry outburst in whatever ways we can, and created all ways of manufacturing and adjusting our behavior to avoid the trauma. So in those situations later in life, let's say our partner exhibits behavior that activates that wound that is inside us. The wounds never go away. We can deal with it, but they never go away. When our partner activates that old wound, in comes the adaptive child to try and defend, to make sure we're going to do whatever we can to protect ourselves, to protect that wounded, vulnerable little child inside of us. Yeah. So in our relationships, what we want to recognize is that we're not all adults in our relationship. There are children in this relationship too. And yes, I may be in a relationship with an adult, but I have an inner child. I have a wounded little child. I have an adaptive little child inside of me, which is going to come out, which there is no getting away from this. This is going to be triggered. My children are going to play a part in my relationship and in my life. And so are yours. So let's meet each other's children. Let's get to understand each other's children and where they're coming from, how they operate, what their wounds are. So I know what not to trigger you, not to behave in ways that I know are going to trigger you. Yeah. If I love you, and let's hope you're in relationship with someone you love and care for. And if you don't, then you need to question this. Yeah. But if I really love you, I want to understand that part of you. I want to understand that part of you, because the inner children are going to, I think someone just said it, hijack it. Yeah. So let me just check my chat. What did you say? Yes. Once the inner child is hijacked, it's very difficult to take the control back before he is finished expressing himself. Yes, Nick, thank you. So this is where emotional mastery comes in. This is our ability to be with our emotions and with each other's emotions. Yeah. We are so, there's, our life, our world is scared of emotions. Yeah. And we've been taught to hide them. We've been taught not to express them. We've been taught that certain ways of expressing our emotions are wrong or bad or unhealthy or dangerous. And yet we cannot stop these emotions from happening. Neither should we try. Emotions are really, really important parts of being a human being. And yet they can cause us problems. So this is where the emotional mastery comes in. If I feel myself being overtaken by a trauma response, like Nick just said, being hijacked by my emotion, when, the way I like to look at it is like we're driving through life in a car and we've got two kids in the back seat of the car. The wounded child and the adaptive child in the backseat of the car. And when our trauma gets activated, all of a sudden, they're in the driving seat. They're making the decisions. They're taking us left and right. And they've got their foot on the accelerator, if they can reach. And all of a sudden now, our mature adult has been rejected and is shoved in the backseat of the car. So what we want to be able to do is understand how our inner children work, how they operate, how they hijack the car, how they get behind the driving seat, and learn to recognize those experiences so we can prevent the hijack from happening before it happens. There are certain cues that we need to be able to feel in our body and understand, this is what's happening. I can feel myself going into that state. What can I do for myself? I can take myself away from the situation. I can do some self-regulation tools, some deep breaths, some walking, some emotional expression. And we can get ourselves into a deregulated state, yeah? And then come back to the situation. Again, I re-emphasize, if we're highly emotional, we are not going to deal with conflict in a very good way. How are we going for time? Okay, 15 minutes to go. I want to give you guys some opportunity for Q&A. So I'm going to start to bring this to a close. So there are also 4 things, really, really important things to remember that are going to trigger your partner's trauma response. And these are naming, blaming, shaming, and stonewalling. I mentioned stonewalling before, talk to the hand and out of here. Shutting down communication, walking away. Naming, calling names, making that person, giving that person a label. You're ugly, you're angry, you're a bitch, you're an asshole, whatever it is, yeah? Blaming, making them responsible for ... responsible for the way I feel, responsible for the mess, responsible for the state of the world, whatever it is. Shaming, using words that put the other person down, that make them feel less than, that are designed to make that person feel inferior. And then, of course, stonewalling, walking away. So there are things to avoid. John Gottman calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Yeah, great things to avoid if we're wanting to prevent highly charged conflict. But then, of course, okay, we've done the emotional mastery bit. We are working at avoiding the 4 horsemen. So how do we come into that situation to then help each other understand? Where do we do the communication bit? Yeah, and how do we do that well? This is, of course, it's a difficult one to do, because as we're communicating, the emotion can come back. Yeah. So it's not that, okay, we've done the emotional mastery, we don't have to do that again. It's a constant thing that we need to be in touch with. We need to be recognizing and watching and be vigilant for in ourselves. So when we're wanting to communicate, we've regulated ourselves, we're able to communicate, we can get our words across in a way which is understandable, which is non-conflammatory, and isn't going to escalate the conflict to even more. But I really want to get my point across. I want to be heard. And I also want to hear the other person. This is the key, guys. This is the key. We both deserve to be heard. We both deserve to be heard. Both perspectives are valid and important, and neither one is right, and both are right, because both are individual perspectives. Yeah. So one of the, you've probably heard of nonviolent communication. Yeah, nonviolent NVC is one of the greatest tools that I can call upon in order to create a formula, a very simple formula for how communication comes over. And essentially that comes down to making I statements, speaking from the I rather than the you. If I say, you do this, you did that, yeah, you see the action, the finger is pointing. I am not taking responsibility for my own actions, for my own feelings. The key part is taking personal responsibility. This is how I feel. This is how I am experiencing the world, how I'm experiencing you, how I'm experiencing your behavior, your actions, your words, whatever it is. We want to be able to speak from the I and say our thing in a way which gets the point across clearly and enables, gives the other person, gives our partner the opportunity to understand us. Not necessarily to change their mind, because we can't force them to change our mind, but what we can do is help them understand our perspective. So very clearly, very simply, we say, I feel this way when you ... Yeah, I feel disrespected when you speak to me that way. I'd prefer if you speak to me this way. Yeah, I feel unvalued when you come home from work and go straight into the office. Yeah, I'd prefer if you came home from work and sat with me for half an hour and had a little check-in to see how our day's been. It's about stating our feeling first, stating the behavior that is instigating that feeling for us, and stating our preference. Make sense? It's a beautiful process. It's very simple. And of course, at first, it feels a little clunky. It feels a little convoluted. And we're trying to write with our left hand or our non-dominant hand. And yet it's a practice that we have to engage in order to get ourselves across and to understand each other. And this is, again, I come back to it. We need to be able to offer the other person the opportunity to state their point of view without interrupting. Yeah, so important. One of the biggest fuels for the fire of conflict, one of the most potent fuels for fire of conflict is interruption. Zip it, listen, hear. And that means hear with your ears, with your body, with your felt sense, with your mind, with your soul. It is not just something that we're, when the other person's talking, we're up here thinking about what we're going to say, how we're going to respond, how they're just full of shit and we're right. Yeah. Okay. I think I'd love to get some Q&A, guys. So I'd love to open it up. If anyone has any questions, anything they'd like to share, their own experiences, anybody feels brave enough to share an experience and get my perspective on it, I'd love to offer that. I feel like I've given enough in my transmission, in my expression there, to give you some great tools to take away. I just want to add a little bit, if I can. It's really important to recognize that this is something that we're learning. Yeah, we're not going to get it right all the time. We're going to fuck it up. We're going to make a mess. We're going to get it wrong. We're going to be we're going to get triggered. Our kids are going to hijack the car again, and they're going to be behind the steering wheel. And it's a process that we need to learn. So give each other their due, give each other the respect and the flexibility and give each other a break. Give each other a break. Yeah. It is a process that we need to learn. Of course, if it is an ongoing thing where progress just doesn't happen in your relationship, you've got something you need to address. Don't just put up with it. Yeah. And if it's something that you're consistently getting feedback from, look at it, address it, do the work. It's necessary. If you don't do it for this relationship, do it for the next and the next and the next, because you're going to continue to repeat the patterns. Okay, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to hand over. Who's got some questions? Let me just have a look at the chat. Someone's opened themselves up. Please open yourself up. Speak to me.
All right.
I'll
Hi.
talk to you, sir.
Oh,
did I run over somebody?
That's okay. I think someone's in. That's okay. Go for it.
I
Who
need
wants
to put
to?
the gallery view on? Well, this is a great talk, and it's like you must have read my diary life story or something, talking about the early childhood, the resourceful kid that made sure that, like, hey, we got this. We can't trust anybody. We got to take care of this ourselves. Totally nailed it. And the I statement is so powerful. But it's difficult to always remember to do it.
It is, and like I said, it's a practice, and in order to practice, we need to be in the practice. We need to continue to be in it, and to go, just look what just happened. My wounded child, my adaptive child, jumped in and took over the microphone for a moment, and all I needed to do was just sit back, take a breath.
Yeah,
did you have a question? Or?
I never heard about that name before, adaptive child. That's totally what I'm naming that little boy that's been needing all that attention. I really don't have a question. I just wanted to validate how accurate your presentation was. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
I see
Gigi.
Nick and Gigi.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nic, for your talk. I resonate totally with what you said, especially about the analogy of the inner child and taking the front seat. And just wanted to share that for me, something that has worked a lot, and you've just said it, is breathing and being present. Because when I have an inner child hijacking me, it feels that I'm not present anymore. So just being aware and conscious to bring my awareness here and now and be present helps me to disconnect and really more connect with the other person.
Absolutely. That's it. You've hit the nail on the head there, Nic, is that ability to be present and notice, just notice what's going on in our body. Yeah. Our emotions speak to us through our body. When we're up here trying to think our way out of emotion, it doesn't work. We cannot think our way out of emotion. Emotion is something that we feel in our body, and we need to express through the body and allow our body to really have its expression. So this is a challenge I think we all have, is trying to fix the problem up here, and think that we're right and we need to address this in some way, And what we actually need to do is sit back, take a breath, feel what's going on for me, notice what I need to do to regulate myself, to take myself into a place where I can really meet the situation. And that's a humbling experience. That takes humility. It takes courage. It takes personal responsibility and ownership to be able to do that. So thank you, Nic. Thank you. Gigi.
hi there.
Hey.
So for someone who tends to be on the people-pleasing spectrum, I have a tendency to hold back in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to, my feelings and wanting to address them to, especially the people that you care about. You do want to be able to address your situation, your feelings, but you don't want to be aggressive in your stance, because sometimes that has a tendency to happen. So how would you address, say, like your family member starting off with feelings without seeming like you're coming out to attack them?
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing you brought up. Thanks. And I think this one's particularly important with family members. Yeah, I think this is, like I said before, with family members, there's so much old baggage that is in place. And as we grow up, we expect people to be the same as they were as children, our families developed. And of course we grow and we evolve, and our needs change, and our views change, and our perspectives change. And you know, in family relationships, this is one of the most difficult areas to put healthy boundaries in place, because of those pre-existing expectations of who I need to be for you, for that person, and vice versa. Yeah. So to get the nuance, it's quite a nuanced way of communicating, where I can hold myself in myself and hold my boundaries firm and say what I need to say without it being aggressive, but getting the point across, and also without apologizing for what I'm saying. Yeah. So there's a way that people pleaser kind of backs off a little bit and apologizes for just being. And then the more aggressive way actually tries to attack and force the person to see their perspective. But there's a place in the middle where we can be assertive, we can speak our truth. And a part of that comes down to surrendering to outcome. Yeah, surrendering outcome, knowing that I could speak what I need to speak, I can speak my point of view and my needs clearly, but the other person may not take them. They may not understand. And I need to then be firm in my boundaries around how I relate with that person. Yeah. They may not fully understand how I see, how I see the world. So we need to surrender to outcome somewhat and relinquish that need to force the other person to see things my way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's
and
hard.
Again,
yeah.
It is hard. And I think that the NVC, the nonviolent communication formula, is a great way to just say that. You know, for instance, speaking to a sibling, it's like, hey, when you speak that way, it just doesn't feel so good for me. I feel a little disrespected. I'm not the child that I used to be. This is what's important to me. And if we're going to have a good relationship from here on in, which I'd really love to have, I need to be spoken to this way. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Beautiful. Thanks, Gigi.
Hey, Nic,
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
From what you were just saying, my initial takeaway was that just like the really snap understanding was NVC is never about surrender, but that's not true, because you further iterated that NVC is about surrendering to the outcome. And so I think there's a definite dynamic to standing one's ground in a non-confrontational way with the I statement and how I feel and so forth and so on. And I'd like you to expand a little bit more on the surrendering to the process versus surrendering to the agitator.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Michael. I just want to say, so so the surrendering to outcome piece is just my addition. It's not necessarily an NVC thing. So NVC can do their thing. My perspective is that we need to go into this from a place of surrendering to outcome, because what I think often happens in conflict, and what causes conflict, is this dogged determination to have the other person respond to us in a certain way. So we need something from them. We want that person to respond to us in the way that we want, and to be the way that we want. And of course, that's not going to happen. Yeah, that other person is a unique individual, and they're going to see the world in their own way. And I want to meet them as their authenticity rather than expecting them to be something that I need from them. So my sense is, and this comes down to holding a space of humility, where I think to meet life in general, we can have views and ideas and desires for how we want things to be, and we need to have a place of surrendering that may all go to shit. It may not look the way we want it to. Yeah. So that for me, it's sort of I guess it's a Buddhist perspective of non-attachment, and recognizing that coming into whatever it is that we're coming into, we need to be able to hold our hands open and recognize that life could deliver itself to me. Life could respond to me however I'm bringing to it, in a way that I have no control over. Does that answer your question, Michael?
Eloquently, thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
So we are at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
Transitioning. If anyone has any more questions, we're gonna go ahead and put is Instagram good? Put your Instagram information in the chat.
Instagram, Facebook, or on the website. Yeah.
Amazing. I love that. This was such an amazing conversation of talking about conflict and the art of war. And it was a beautiful chat and message conversation we had in here. And I just want to recognize anyone. I really, really encourage you. This whole festival is about really stepping into being seen and feeling heard. And Gigi, I know we were all raising our hands at the same time. I want to recognize you and honor you for just like, your question was around being heard. So thank you for being so patient with that. And for anyone else who has any fear about like taking themselves off of camera or anything, just know that you're fully loved and held in the space. And we're consistently trying to create connection circles and ways for you all to get to meet each other and go deeper. And I know on the first day we had like a ton of them. And so today we have a couple more talks. And if you feel courageous, and if you'd love to put your camera on, we would love to see you. We would love to connect with you. And actually, like, this is how we connect. Some people are still stuck in their homes. I know in Canada and Europe, there's a lot of people who actually aren't able to see people right now. I know that Em actually gets a fine if she leaves her home, which is super serious. We've all gone through phases with quarantine, but if you're still in this space where you want to be seen and heard, I definitely recommend just like taking on your camera and just allowing yourself to feel more seen in the space. So this was like the perfect segue into our next talk. But before we do that, can we all take ourselves off of mute and rub our palms